In an ancient Gnostic Egyptian text called the Trimorphic Protenoi, we read that this object came from the abyss, wrought chaos among the wandering thrones, the planets. This intruder adopted its own path, unlike the other thrones, and was thereafter the bringer of destruction. In 1945, among the Egyptian Nag Hammadi texts was found an obscure writing that explains that this intruder who broke the power of the thrones was called the Phoenix and served as a witness against the Archons, the Lords of Time, that would continue its devastation until the final apocalypse, the bringer of darkness. This was found in On the Origin of the World, a Gnostic book of the Nag Hammadi Library. In the Near East, Babylonian and Akkadian texts like the Enuma Elish and fragments of older Sumerian records explain that a vast destruction occurred long before their civilizations began, when an unknown object was introduced into the solar system. This object is not to be confused with the Nibiru of the Anunnaki. Ancient Egyptian Heliopolitan text of Edfu reads that before appearance of the Neteru, the ancient gods, a great cataclysm killed all the inhabitants of the first creation when the Pen God appeared, like a dragon bringing darkness. Pen God is fiend deity, meaning the phoenix. 414 years after its first appearance, the Phoenix reappears, causing volcanic resurfacing, continental quakes, oceans slipping over their basins, whole colonies of human survivors from the world before, now erased. 3895 BC reset begins, the Genesis story making Phoenix as a fiery revolving blade that ends Eden. 6,000-year countdown till the next reset begins. The Great Pyramid of Giza preserves 3,895-year period till the calendar change. Over 1,000 years after the reset pole shift, the three great pyramids on the Giza Plateau are built. One of these giant pyramids contains within its rectilinear measurements the golden proportion, phi and pi, or 3.1416 curvature equations, palindromes, the 365.25-day solar year, lunar cycles, tolerances of laser precision, unique upper chambers no other pyramids in the world contain, and an encoded geometrical timeline exhibiting from several dimensions of arithmetic the future date on our calendar of May 2040. The other giant pyramid is a decoy. The rectilinear measurements of the Great Pyramid were made by the scientist Sir Flinders Petrie, and they are endorsed by Egyptologists today. But more on this astonishing pyramid is later in this presentation. In 2653 BC, the Phoenix appears. The Indus Valley cities are destroyed by quakes, flooding, falling mud, red rains, and prolonged darkness. 1,242 years after the 3895 BC Phoenix pole shift. The Harappan civilization was at peace. There's no evidence of weapons or war at that time period. The Phoenix object visited the world and found a human population enlightened and living prosperously. In 2239 BC, Phoenix reappeared, darkening the sun for days as meteoric rain, red mud, geologic upheavals, and whole land masses sank beneath the oceans. Every civilization was reset, and numerous new calendars suddenly appeared in Old Bronze Age at this date. 2239 BC was 1656 years after the 3895 BC reset pole shift of Phoenix, and 414 years after the 2653 BC ruin of the Indus Valley civilization. Mohenjo-Daro is again destroyed. The Harappan civilization at this time was found at peace. There are no evidence from archaeology of weapons, warfare, or anything beyond something used for a hunting capacity. In 2239 BC, the Atlantic Ocean rose and broke through the land bridge of Gibraltar, connecting Africa to Europe. In hours, over 100 cities in the Mediterranean valleys were flooded as the Mediterranean Sea was born in a single day. destroying Malta and Sardinia and pushing through the Dardanelles to create the Black Sea, also drowning human settlements. Elsewhere in the world, seas drained away to leave behind deserts, ever remembered as the Great Flood. Frank Joseph, in one of his modern published books, notes that in 1998, several scientists from various fields met and concluded that a cataclysmic event occurred in 2240 BC, so terrible it interrupted every old Bronze Age culture. This is approximate, but it's 1 year within the Phoenix date of 2239 BC. The numbers and the dates and the timelines that I'm presenting to you will make sense as the presentation continues. These are not arbitrary, nor are they the inventions of my own. These were culled from source materials going back as far as 2,500 years. The exact dates of what happened in the ancient world can be derived from many different mathematical perspectives. Greater minds than I have recorded these events and dated them. I merely put them together with a calculator to produce my published books in this presentation, as you will see. Contrary to the religionist teachings, the Great Flood popularized in the Bible and many traditions was not an end of humanity, it was a civilization reset. In 1963 BC, in the reign of the Sumerian king Amar-Udak, later known as Marduk or Merodach, the sun became violent and it darkened. This event was also remembered in India in the Vedic Ramayana. Centuries later, the Greeks would remember Zeus defeating Typhon, or the Phoenix. 552 years after the Great Flood, in 1687 BC, the Heliolithic Maritime Empire was broken. Over 3,000 ancient Bronze Age cities and ports were destroyed by a sudden appearance of a dragon that devoured the sun and set the moon on fire. Over 40 chronological references target the 1687 BC as a total reset to cities, calendars, and dynasties. This is the date the Kraken darkened the sun in the legend of Perseus when the city of Joppa was flooded, the ancient story of the killing of Medusa. 1687 BC was the Ogygian flood of ancient writers, which was considered the beginning of the Aegean kingdoms because all those that drowned in the flooding stayed under the sea. This was truly a proto-Greek beginning, and it started with a civilization reset. The Phoenix reset of 1687 BC ended the age of the Heliolithic master builders. These are the ancestors of the order called the Craft, whose public identity is known today as the Masons. For obvious reasons, the final and 33rd degree of the Craft is the Phoenix. The Phoenix is a symbol of civilization resets, of a burned world reborn out of the ashes. More on this through this presentation. Knowing nothing of the Phoenix or its timeline or any of the principal tenets of this theory, Stephen Jones dated the following event 1687 BC exactly. The earth shook from its place, the sun darkened, and all the kings were terrified, and a great consternation seized them, as recorded in the book of Jasher, chapter 37, verses 17 through 18. This is phenomenal. His writings detail that human history is divided between 414-year periods, a cursed earth period. The 1687 BC cataclysm completely destroyed 5 Delta River maritime port civilizations. The Urubamba Valley River in South America, the Chinese Yellow River civilization, the Egyptian Nile civilization, the Tigris-Euphrates Near Eastern civilization, and the Indus Valley civilization, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro destroyed again. 138 years after this destruction, historian Castleton reports in 1549 BC a great destruction occurred in the Mediterranean, centered at the Cyclades region, just over the horizon from Egypt. Also in 1549, the Tempest Stele of Amenophis reads that a great darkness fell upon the world so thick torches were not seen, houses were flooded. Amenhotep's throne name preserves Noph, or Neph, the winged disc symbol of the phoenix. Egyptian names are similar to West Semitic names, only mirrored. Noph is Phoenix, backwards. Historians dating the disasters of Ovid, Servius, Homer, Samaritan Chronicle, Mexican Annals of Cuautitlan, and Annals of King Amastrama of Ugarit relate that in 1411 BC that the sun was attacked from the region of Cygnus, which is the northern heavens. This is also the origin of the myth of Phaethon. This 1411 BC date is 138 years after the 1549 BC destruction in the Mediterranean. And 138 years after this, in 1273 BC, in the annals of King Merciless of Hatti, the sun became obscured by unknown means. In this year, Archaix won the kingship of Achaia over his brother by predicting that the sun would darken. In the Near East, was widely reported that the sky became red as blood. It should now be mentioned that these sun darkenings and sky blackening episodes have nothing to do with eclipses involving the moon. Many ancient records reveal that the moon had nothing to do with these cataclysms. 1135 BC cataclysm in China is the mandate of heaven changing, and the Shang dynasty collapses. 250,000 Chinese escaping war escape in ships to reappear as the Olmeca in Central America. The Chinese dragon Phoenix was called the Fang. Scholars have long noted the associations between the ancient Bronze Age Chinese and the Central American Olmecs of the 10th, 11th, and 9th centuries BC. A very interesting study. In 1135 BC, Pharaoh Seknakti of Egypt's reign ends as he reports a circling star that spit fire at the very end of his reign. The next ruler is Ramesses III, who records a terrible tsunami and destruction. Historians estimate that 3.8 million people died in this year from catastrophe as the kingship changed in Egypt. At the very end of his reign, Seknakti reported that an immense black cloud covered the sky. The sun turned blood red and disappeared. Red dust blanketed the land. Also in 1135, Nebuchadnezzar I of Babylon recorded that an object like a comet darkened the sun. In the month of May, the Tuatha Danann invaded Ireland in the Battle of Moytura, shocking the Firbolgs by making the sun darken. And in the Far East, the Chinese report an attack on the sun. 414 years later, in 721 BC, the Chinese report a change in the heavens, an inability to predict the darkening of the sun. Plutarch and Ovid wrote that at the end of Romulus's reign over Rome, the sun was darkened. Flames seen in the heavens with thunder. Darkening of the whole world was confirmed at that time by Latin writers. Assyrian writings claim a new world age began. These changes were only caused by celestial events that wrought destruction on earth. Babylonian record has the sun turned black. In this year, the 10 tribes of Israel, who had long been overlords over Judah, were carried away into Assyrian captivity. The Edomites rewrote their scriptures, renamed their prophets, and invented the Moses epic. Counting 138 years after this, we arrive at 583 BC. In this year, the sun darkened, but not by the moon, predicted 2 years earlier by Thales of Miletus. In the historical narrative, from this point on, it becomes more and more clear that none of these civilization Phoenix reset disasters have anything to do with the moon. Academia pushes the eclipse interpretation despite the actual ancient writers' explanations that the moon was not involved. In this year, for unknown reasons, Japan initiates a new calendar in Nihon Shoki. The Delphic oracle in Greece initiates a new Pythian calendar. Pliny dates the Thales sun darkening to be 170 years after the 753 BC founding of Rome, and he is dead on accurate. This sun-darkening event stopped the Medo-Lydian War, resulting in a peace accord negotiated by Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon. Like the Tuatha De Danann, Thales of Miletus was a Phoenician by remote descent. The Phoenicians had access to the Phoenix material. They had access to libraries from all over the Mediterranean world. It is from these libraries that Aristarchus got his information, as well, as we will see. 138 years later, in 445 BC, the 27th dynasty of Egypt, during the reign of Artaxerxes I of Persia, suffers widespread fires, flooding, caused by an unknown astronomical body. Dr. Renaud de Jong wrote that the disaster lasted 13 days and killed approximately 830,000 people. 414 years later, in 31 BC, Macedonian dynasty of Egypt records the appearance of a sky dragon of immense size, passing through the heavens with comets, causing a red rain like blood. Cleopatra and Antony are defeated in the Battle of Actium as a terrible earthquake rocks Greece and Judea. In the Far East, the Han dynasty of China records the passing of a dragon trailing a red vapor. This appearance of the Phoenix in 31 BC was 552 years after 583 BC, when Thales predicted the darkening of the sun, which was 552 years after the reign of Nebuchadnezzar I in 1135 BC, when the sun darkened, which was 552 years after 1687 BC, when many civilizations in the world suffered a reset when the sun darkened. In the Ogygian flood, which was 552 years after the Great Flood of 2239 BC, where every civilization in the entire world suffered a phoenix reset. It was at this time in history that Lucretius and Pliny were alive, documenting many things in their naturalist studies. Lucretius had written a 7,340-something line poem called On the Nature of the Universe, and in that poem he wrote a most incredible statement that some unknown body, not the moon, passes over the surface of the sun and darkens the earth at a fixed time. And Lucretius associated this to repetitive earthquakes that destroy civilizations. Pliny, in Natural History, wrote that the span of human history there transpires ominous and long drawn-out eclipses of the sun, and that their cause was hidden by the rarity of their occurrence, and for this reason they are not known. Pliny added that these strange darkenings of the sun were quite natural, and that they transpired at very fixed times. In 1919, Charles Fort, in the Book of the Damned, wrote, "So it is not only that many eclipses unrecognized by astronomers as eclipses have occurred, but there are several allusions to intense darknesses that have occurred upon this earth, quite as eclipses occur, but they are not referable to any known eclipsing body." Although it's not the subject matter of this video, the Great Pyramid's internal dimensions is a template of our holosphere. It records the physics constants and coding that runs our entire reality that we believe is the real universe, and is not. Inside the dimensions of the Great Pyramid, we see this 3,895 year timeline encoded within. The Phoenix reset of 3895 BC is 3895 BC because of the creation of the Anno Domini calendar, which begins 1 AD. But the Anno Domini calendar was created many centuries later. It is a calendar that was created in retrospect. Those of you who do the mud flood research take this into consideration. It is not the first time that a calendar has been imposed on our reality that wasn't designed to be used or initiated at that time, but was done in retrospect. We will explore more later in this presentation about the internal arrangements of the Great Pyramid and how they refer to the Phoenix chronology. In the year 384 of our new calendar, Anno Domini, Lycosthenes recorded that a terrible sign appeared in the skies. The Inca ruler Tupac Pachacuti VI forbid the scribes to write about the disasters they suffered, fearing future generations would read the writings and cause the events to occur again. The Inca were mindful of a 2070-year period, which is 138 times 15. The fear of the Inca ruler Tupac is specifically attached to the idea of sympathetic magic, the creation of a physical ritual, an object that interferes, that causes patterns and events to occur. This is why he had those books burned. 138 years later, in 246 Common Era, earthquakes and volcanism in Central America, the Sulaco pyramid partly covered in lava. Old British Roman annals report that it rained blood in different parts of the kingdom, and that a terrible bloody sword cut across the sky. 138 years after this, in 522, earthquake struck Olympia, Greece. Over Britain, during the reign of Octa of Kent, dragons were seen in the heavens, raining great drops of blood. A star appeared in the form of a dragon, and thus began the controversial period we call the Dark Ages. Phoenix visitations to the ancient Americans were linked to the Black Sun. During the Dark Ages of Europe and Asia, from 522 to 1350 Common Era, the Maya and several other civilizations were totally destroyed in repeated cataclysms. The evidence throughout Central and South America is everywhere. None of these can be dated with precision, so perfect has their histories been lost, but the architecture remains. Like the Tower of Babel story, it seems that these people had high sophisticated knowledge and knew what these pyramids were for and incorporated this data in the architecture. Pyramids in the Americas, some of them have 138 steps. Some of them are 138 meters high, 138 features. Some of them have 138 niches where sacred fires were burned, or 138 decorative dragon heads. This is common all throughout the Americas, and it has never been sufficiently explained. This coding of 138 all throughout our reality is explained in detail in 2 of my books. The profound mystery concerning the Phoenix Cataclysm reset prophesied by Mother Shipton to occur exactly in 2040 is the subject matter of one of my YouTube videos. Mother Shipton of Yorkshire is born in 1488, a Phoenix year. She died in 1561, the year Sir Francis Bacon of York was born. Sir Bacon died in 1626, the very next Phoenix year, 138 years after her birth. In 1626, the Dutch found New Amsterdam, later to become New York. Do you see the thread? This is Simulation Theory, exhibit number 341. In 1488, the northern prophetess Ursula Southfield was born, later called Mother Shipton, as you can see in my other video. This is a year of a Phoenix transit. Whether original or an introduction of new material, it does not matter. A Phoenix reset cataclysm is perfectly described and dated to happen in 1 century after a Second World War, which would be 2040. Even if the passage is a forgery, someone introduced it into her prophecy. In 1561, the northern prophetess of Yorkshire, called Mother Shipton, died. In the same year, Nostradamus published his famous prophecies. Both predicted the reset of 2040. Nostradamus even claiming it's in the month of May. This is Simulation Theory, exhibit number 342. In 1626, after 4 years of drought and famine in China, the sky darkened. As a roaring was heard, it rained stones upon the land, killing people, livestock, and crops. Our history is fascinating and virtually unknown by those who we trust to teach it. 138 years after 1626, things are about to get interesting. The year is 1764. Astronomer Hoffman sees an object pass over 1/5 of the sun's surface, darkening it in the month of May. The object moved from north to south, crossing over the plane of the ecliptic. 250,000 people in Europe witnessed this darkness. We have to thank Michael Pell of Eden Cafe for posting this gem. It's a clip of Star Trek. It shows Captain Kirk in front of a diagram of a solar system But this diagram is not of Nibiru as he thinks. It is absolutely Phoenix. This Star Trek diagram of the Sigma Draconis system shows north to south orbit of Phoenix on its path between Venus and Earth. Exactly what is illustrated to the right in my book, When the Sun Darkens, which was published in 2009. The chart shows right there very clearly the object Phoenix on a 138-year orbit across the ecliptic. Too many coincidences exhibits no coincidence at all. Sigma Draconis. Sigma is simply Greek and is the symbol for a standard deviation. Draconis is the dragon, which they're calling Phoenix, which is the ancient designation and Mother Shipton's and Nostradamus' representation of the next 2040 reset, a dragon. This diagram on Star Trek is precisely what astronomer Hoffman of the Royal Society in England saw through his telescope, an object passing over the ecliptic from the north going into the south, blocking the sun. And for this reason, his findings were rejected. 138 years after astronomer Hoffman witnessed planet Phoenix, hundreds of billions of tons of red mud, dust, reddish rains blanketed the world and covered islands and ships in the year 1902. A new star appeared, some believing it a planet, bringing forth also a new comet, later called Comet Morehouse, attended by earthquakes and volcanism. In May, cities around the world reported a blackening of the sky. The mud flood researchers will find many of their documented modern resets were in 1902. A vast amount of effort and resources has gone into erasing this event from the historical record. My books, When the Sun Darkens, Shocking Secrets of Antiquity, and Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse document the hundreds of bureaus, government agencies, mega Fortune 500 companies, institutions, industrial revolution, all the things that changed in our world and began in the year 1902. These works also exhibit numerous charts and diagrams showing 1902 and how it aligns with the rest of the reset dates throughout antiquity. Having studied scientific journals, manuals, and books that are no longer existing, in 1919 Charles Fort concluded, after exhaustive research, that in 1902 and 1903 we passed through the remains of a powdered world, left over from an ancient interplanetary dispute, brooding in space like red resentment ever since. The other dark age of the year 1902. And this American coin, minted in 1902, was given to me by a friend who really thinks I'm a little too obsessed with 1902. Since this coin came to me, funny how holograms work. So much occurred in the year 1902, it would require an entirely independent series of videos. I could not contain even my own research within the perimeters of 3 books. A 4th, 5th, and maybe even a 6th book on this subject would have to be written just to describe all the changes in the world in the month of May in 1902. In 1902, the Masonic United States changed the phoenix on the Great Seal to an eagle after 120 years since 1782. The Great Seal Pyramid identifies the 13th degree of Masonry, the Royal Arch of Enoch, builder of the Great Pyramid. 1902 Phoenix Transit began the Masonic elite's final 138 years. They know and have long been preparing for May 2040. Few Americans realize that the Great Seal of their nation was the Phoenix. They have always assumed it was the eagle, and it's not. The change from the Phoenix to the eagle is not without significance, but even more so because it happened very quietly and with almost no publicity in the year 1902. The Masons know well the geometrical dating of the Great Pyramid, what it contains, what it does, what it means. At least the upper echelons, the elites in the Masonic orders know this. The three-dimensional geometry of the Great Pyramid forms the number 10, the tetratus, and this is well known in Masonry. What's not so well known is that all four slopes, each slope of the Great Pyramid is at 51 degrees. 4 of these slopes is 204. Times 10 is 2040. This tetratus embodies the number 10. So we have a geometrical dating right here in the Anno Domini timeline as 2040. Those who would hold that this is entirely too arbitrary must take into consideration that the Anno Domini calendar is a retrospective calendar. It is not a calendar that had a beginning date at any definitive time in history, but was invented because of a story. Anno Domini means year of the Lord, but it's not the Lord you're thinking of. In the writings of Nostradamus that were not published in his quatrains, in his centuries and famous prophecies, the Roman researcher Ottavio Cesare Ramati published in his own book, Nostradamus, the Lost Manuscript, that the prophet refers to the year 1903. Nostradamus wrote, "Many will die before the phoenix dies, until 670 his dwelling shall endure." This is very profound. The meaning is enigmatic, but the reference to the phoenix in proximity to 1903 cannot be ignored. We have reviewed 22 documented phoenix transits spanning 6,210 years. Every date here was taken from other authors' research or text, and every date fits on the 138-year timeline to the year 2040 AD. 2 published books, 61 charts, and hundreds of pages of unpublished research demonstrate the 138-year chronology of the Phoenix object to May 2040. This 138-year period and its multiples has not passed by history unnoticed. 138 years in the ancient rabbinical tradition is the time between visitations of the angel of death, and it is linked to the ruin of Sodom and Gomorrah. 414 years is cursed time in the chronological timelines of Stephen Jones. 1,242 years is the span from Adam to Noah, according to Nostradamus, and 1656 years is the duration of the pre-flood world from the beginning to the end in Genesis. 1656 Annus Mundi was the date of the Great Flood. The Egyptian disaster tradition also preserved the unit of 1656. Rashi, over 1,000 years ago, wrote that 1656 years was the time between 2 cataclysmic events. 2208 was the old world date for the Ogygian flood that we reviewed earlier, is actually 1687 BC. 2070 years was the Inca belief of the beginning of time. 2484 years was the period between cataclysms according to Aristarchus. 2760 years was a period recognized by the ancient Maya according to Hans Bellamy. In the mystic traditions of Helena Blavatsky, we find that 4968 years concern planet Vulcan, which we know of as Phoenix. Every one of these historic references is specific, and all are divisible by 138. In light of the fact that it is now shown, it is demonstrated right here in the following charts, that 138 and all of its multiples up to 6210 are found in the rectilinear measurements of the internal dimensions of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. We can no longer hold to the theory that a pharaoh had built this monument for a tomb. We can no longer hold to the untenable ideas that any human culture known today had anything to do with the building of this monument. This structure is a mine of enigmas. We are barely penetrating this architecture, having absolutely no idea how sophisticated the culture was that built this monument. Laser precision tolerances and technolithic engineering so precise we cannot manufacture it today. We're looking at a computer template, a series of algorithmic fourth dimensional coding that is designed to interface with our own holospheric reality. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I understand exactly what its function is, but I have a theory. I'm really close to believing that this monument is designed to be activated. And the activation of this monument is going to stop this cataclysm protocol from continuing. We are going to reset the system, but without the interference pattern of this Phoenix dynamic. The Phoenix phenomenon is a storm unlike any storm anyone alive today has ever experienced. The cities of the world will look very close to this. There are people preparing even now for the total collapse of human civilization that will occur in the month of May in the year 2040, 20 years from now. As this is being posted on YouTube right now, we have 20 years remaining, a period relatively short when considering that only 20 years ago it was the year 2000. The world as we know it, the transcultural global civilization that we have built, the technological comforts, the freedoms, environmental and personal protections, all these will come to a sudden and violent end in 2040. In the month of May, a vast dark celestial object will pass directly between the Earth and the Sun, transiting closer than Venus, and during the occult of the solar orb, the sky will darken. Day will be turned into night. Our world will be bathed in an immense debris field from the sky of gigantic falling rocks, ice, and billions of tons of red mud. After May of 2040, there will be no more high school graduations, summer vacations, no more Super Bowls, presidential elections, social networking sites. There won't even be an internet. The thousands of satellites orbiting our world will have been destroyed, be they actual satellites or halo drones. However we have this infrastructure set up, it will cease to exist. The Olympics will be a thing of the past. The 4th of July in North America will not be a time for celebration. At Thanksgiving, families will not sit at tables eating turkey and feasts. Survivors will be starving in their daily search for something to eat amidst the rubble and ash. At Christmas, there will be no goodwill toward men, but men and women will be hunted as cannibalism plagues the wasted cities of the nations. No more fast food restaurants, fields filled with produce and grains, no hospitals, no television, no constitutional rights, nor police to enforce them. Gone will be the days of governmental organization of society, for warlords will rule their urban kingdoms with gangs of armed men. Entire peaceful communities that survive the cataclysm will be invaded as marauders seeking their supplies and resources will slay and enslave those unable to come together and defend what they have left. Women, young girls, and boys will be brutalized, raped, tortured, and eaten, the strong preying on the weak for sexual gratification and sustenance. A woman will become more precious than fine gold. They will be used in a new barter system. They will be enslaved, used for barter for gear, food, and weapons. Captured males will be used to entertain the people in abandoned superdomes and arenas in horrific blood sports, mirroring the Colosseum of Roman times. As anarchy prevails, a new Stone Age emerges with strange religions and cults defying God, as men become worshipped and human sacrifices resurrect from the elder ways of pagan times. A new civilization of barbarity will arise in 2040 after a quarter of the world's population dies instantly from the cataclysms of the Phoenix. And then another quarter of the population dies in the 7 years following in global famine, chaos, war, violence. Dictators form new governments, and republicanism and democracy will disappear as relics of antiquity. In May 2040, we'll be back to horse and buggy. We are stuck in a loop. We have been where we are today many times before, on the precipice of a cataclysm. For centuries, we depended on draft animals for living and building. 1804 begins rapid advancements in technology. In 1804, steam-powered locomotive. In 1825, the Erie Canal. 1874, electricity. 1885, skyscraper. 1892, motion picture. 1903, manned flight. 1906, the wireless radio. 1945, the atomic test. 1947, the transistor, which made computers possible. 1990, the World Wide Web. 2004, personal cell phones were ubiquitous. From horseback to Hadron Collider is only 200 years. All over the world has been found evidence that we humans have experienced the same explosion of technological capability over and over and over again. The ancient Vedic records have detailed specific flight manuals in Sanskrit and descriptions of aerial battles using machines and even atomic weapons. The Egyptians used electricity, as did the Sumerians. Archaic engineers floated 100-ton blocks through the air using sympathetic vibration. The Great Pyramid was built using geopolymers, diamond tip drills, and hydraulic combustion. At Knossos in the Mediterranean has been found many drainage ditches that employed the science of hyperbolic curves. The astonishing complexity of Cambodian temples cannot be replicated with our current technology. They are truly mysterious even today. 200 years. We humans have been reset over and over again. The mechanism of these destructive reset cataclysms was known in antiquity by many cultures as the Pin deity, the Feng, the Funk, the Noph, the Typhon, and lastly as the Phoenix. The Egyptians, Hebrews, Ionians, Mycenaeans, Greeks, Thales, Aristarchus, and even Nostradamus knew the Phoenix chronology, and now we do too. These videos contain original research not borrowed from other videos. The history of our world is nothing like you've been taught. The Archaix channel will guide you through the dark. Reset theory is definitely thousands of years old. This is nothing new. It's only new to the general population now, as information is exploding across the internet, Facebook, Google, and YouTube demographic. Over 26 centuries ago, Greek statesman Solon of Athens visited the city of Sais in Egypt. Egyptian historian priest told the wandering philosopher this statement about the ancient world, even prior to their times in the 7th century BC. When the gods purged the earth with a deluge of water, the survivors in your country are herdsmen and shepherds who dwell in the mountains, but those who, like you, who live in cities are carried away into the rivers of the sea. Just when you and other nations are beginning to be provided with letters and the other requisites of civilized life, after the usual interval, the stream from heaven, like a pestilence, comes pouring down and leaves only those of you who are destitute of letters and education. And so you have to begin all over again like children and know nothing of what happened in ancient times. You remember a single deluge only, but there were many previous ones. You and your whole city are descended from a small seed or remnant of them which survived, and this was unknown to you because for many generations the survivors of that destruction died, leaving no written record. Almost 1,000 years later, very little had changed in catastrophe literature. Arnobius of Sicca, in Against the Heathen, Book 1, also acknowledged resets. He wrote, "Ransack the records of history written in various languages, and you will find that all countries have often been desolated and deprived of their inhabitants. Every kind of crop is consumed and devoured by locusts and by mice. Go through your own annals, and you will be taught that about these plagues and how often former ages were visited by them, and how often they were brought to the wretchedness of poverty. Cities shaken by powerful earthquakes taught her to their destruction." What? Did not bygone days witness cities with their entire populations engulfed by huge rents that appeared in the earth? Or did they enjoy a condition exempt from such disasters? When was the human race destroyed by a flood? Was it not before us? When was the world set on fire and reduced to coals and ashes? Was it not before us? When were the greatest cities engulfed in the billows of the sea? Was it not long before us? The ancient authorities were all in agreement that resets were the rule, not the exception. Lucretius, Pliny the Elder, Ovid, Marcus Varro, Ammianus Marcellinus, Diodor Siculus, Tacitus, Procopius, and so many more besides. King Solomon did say it best, "There is nothing new under the sun." Well, this is Jason with Archaix.com. We're going to talk about, in this very short video, Mother Shipton, the Northern Prophetess. Very few people know about this very controversial public figure because there's a lot of intrigue wrapped up in her prophecies. Like the Hebraic book of Jasher, there's been many forgeries released. Sometimes it's hard to separate fact from fiction. What we have here, not something that can be refuted, not something that can be argued against. What I'm about to present you today has never been heard. It has never been published. This is This goes a long way in supporting my theory, simulation theory, ancestor simulations, this new idea that history is being sculpted for us, that many of the things that we believe that had come to pass did not come to pass at all. They were scripted for us. The story of Mother Shipton begins in 1488. She was born of a witch. The individual details have nothing to do with what I'm about to tell you. It does not matter if some scholar comes forth and tells you that her original prophecies as put forth in the 1500s are very different than the ones in the 1600s, and the 1700s, and the 1800s, and now. As a matter of fact, in my book, Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse, right here, published by Book Tree of San Diego, I have the entire Mother Shipton prophecies for you to decide. But it doesn't matter, because what I'm telling you doesn't matter if she wrote this or not. Let me explain. Many Christians are offended today when they find out from scholars and from academia that many elements of the book of Revelation are not Christian at all. In fact, the apocalypse, the book of Revelation, the iconography, the imagery that is employed actually antedate Christianity. Many of the images, a lot of the syntax and grammar, the grammatical codes are copied straight out of Alexandrian Gnostic writings. Most of the contents of the apocalypse of the book of Revelation comes straight from ancient Gnostic records and the Greek Sibylline oracles. But that's not the topic of this discussion. However, it is very relevant. Mother Shipton prophesied many things about the future. This is what she did. There is a passage in her prophecies where it does not matter if she is the originator of this material or not, because we have some very profound things that have happened around this personage. Mother Shipton, born in 1488, was a phoenix year. In the Anno Domini calendar, 1488 is golden proportion, 744 and 744. Now remember, I hold to the tenet that we live in a holosphere, and that even our physics constants are nothing but coding, and that our DNA is coding that responds to our external environment. What I'm about to tell you now, it doesn't matter if this woman said these prophecies. What matters is that these prophecies were said, and they were put in her prophecies over 300 years ago. Ursula Southill, the witch, lived 500 years ago. Whether she said this or not is irrelevant, but I'm about to read to you what was put or injected into her prophecies. I'm about to read to you things that only apply to the Phoenix object and what it does in civilization resets. Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse, I'm going to give you a reading of the Mother Shipton prophecies that are absolutely relevant to the 2040 AD apocalypse that she describes. And if it wasn't her, somebody did it. Somebody put it in her prophecies. Somebody who didn't want to be identified. It is the same phenomenon we find in the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation may or may not have been written by a Christian. It doesn't matter, but it contains ancient Gnostic and ancient Sibylline Greek oracles and prophecies that could have never derived from a Christian pen. There is a reason why early Christian churches spent centuries hunting down libraries and destroying all the older texts. They had to cover up what they had done. In the same way, the Vatican has done a phenomenal job of gathering as many Yorkshire prophecy texts as they can. The Jesuits have burned many of Mother Shipton's works. We have here, in 1991, released the entire poem, which is really interesting because it was 252 years after Ursula Southill's prophecies were published for the first time in over 100 years. They had been lost, which was exactly 252 years after she was born in 1488. Listen closely. The perimeters of our existence scream at us to pay attention. The mathematical perfection of our existence screams at us to know that we are in a very sophisticated biogram. The evidence in history is everywhere. Somebody wanted you to know something about May 2040 AD, so I'm going to read it to you. The Yorkshire Prophecy, starting line 72. In 1926, build houses light of straw and sticks, for then shall mighty wars be planned, and fire and sword shall sweep the land. When pictures seem alive with movements free, when boats like fishes swim in the sea, when men like birds shall scour the sky, then half the world deep drenched in blood shall die. For those who live the century through, in fear and trembling this shall do, flee to the mountains and the dens, to bog and forest and wild fens. For storms will rage and oceans roar, when Gabriel stands on sea and shore, and he blows his wondrous horn. Old worlds die, new be born. A fiery dragon will cross the sky 6 times before this earth shall die. Mankind will tremble and frightened be, for the 6th heralds in this prophecy. For 7 days and 7 nights man will watch this awesome sight. The tides will rise beyond their ken to bite away the shores, and then the mountains will begin to roar. The earthquakes split the plain to shore, and flooding waters rushing in will flood the lands with such a din that mankind cowers in muddy fen and snarls about his fellow men. He bares his teeth and fights and kills and secretes food in secret hills. And ugly in his fear he lies to kill marauders, thieves, and spies. Man flees in terror from the floods, and kills and rapes and lies in blood, and spilling blood by mankind's hands will stain and bitter many lands. And when the dragon's tail is gone, man forgets and smiles and carries on, to apply himself too late, for mankind has earned deserved fate. His masked smile, his false grandeur, will serve to the gods their anger stir, and they will send the dragon back to light the sky. His tail will crack upon the earth and rend the earth, and man shall flee lord, king, and serf. But slowly they are routed out to seek diminishing waterspout, and men will die of thirst before the ocean dries to mount the shore, and lands will crack and rend anew. You think it strange, it will come true. And in some far-off distant land, some men of such a tiny band will have to leave their solid mount and span the earth, those few to count. Who survives this and then begin the human race again, but not on land already there, but on ocean beds, stark, dry, and bare. Not every soul on earth will die as the dragon's tail goes sweeping by. Not every land on earth will sink, but those will wallow in stench and stink, on rotting bodies of beasts and men, of vegetation crisped on land. But the land that rises from the sea will be dry and clean and soft and free of mankind's dirt, and therefore be the source of man's new dynasty. And those that live will ever fear the dragon's tail for many years. But time erases memory. You think it's strange, but it will be. The dragon's tail is but a sign for mankind's fall and man's decline. And before this prophecy is done, I shall be burned at the stake at one. My body singed, my soul set free. You think I utter blasphemy. You're wrong. These things have come to me. This prophecy will come to be. This has been a reading from Mother Shipton's most controversial prophecies. The only prophecies that are not detail specific to the country of England. They may be her original prophecies, and all the English prophecies are the forgeries, but it doesn't matter what is forgery and what is not. All that matters is somebody, maybe the Northern Prophetess, maybe Ursula Southhill, maybe somebody else, a copyist, someone who wrote her prophecies and injected what they want. But the fact remains, they specifically said that 2 world wars would occur and half the world would die. And 1 century after the 2nd World War, the dragon's tail would return, and oceans would slip from their basins, volcanic resurfacing would occur, whole cities would plunge into the sea, and new civilizations would have to be built on drying ocean beds. A complete lithospheric displacement, a pole shift. Somebody wanted us to know this material, and they put it in there. Just like somebody wanted us to know the Sibylline oracles, though they masked it in Christian iconography. It's very interesting how all this works. We don't know if this is of human design or if something greater is preserving elements of ancient truths and making sure that we receive them in the garb that we will accept them. In the year 4309 BC, the Phoenix appeared and ended a 930-year-old civilization. The only records, traditions, ancient texts ever found that mention the origin or reason for the Phoenix were found in the records of the Gnostics. These Gnostic texts claim that the Phoenix was designed to be a keeper of the calendar. It was to be a witness against the Archons, who were the lords of time, the manipulators of human events. We have found over and over reference throughout ancient texts, chronographies, modern chronologists like Stephen Jones, and in the chronometry of the Great Pyramid, we have found that the year 3895 BC is year 1 of the ancient Annus Mundi calendar. It was a cataclysm so horrific that the survivors thought it was a new heavens and a new earth. This is year 1 of the pre-flood world, year 1 of the vapor canopy period of Genesis. Lithospheric displacement. There is a 30-degree pole shift. It causes a new heavens and new earth to appear, fiery flaming sword in the sky, and this is the beginning of the timelines, basically, that all other calendrical systems are attached to. 2653 BC is in the vapor canopy period. We have tradition of flooding in Ireland. It must have been a particularly bad flood, a poisonous inundation of the sea, and the 7 lakes are overflowed. Independently, Zechariah Sitchin in his Earth Chronicles books records that at this exact year was a major disaster according to Near Eastern texts. 2239 BC is the Great Flood in the month of May. It is the day of the vapor canopy collapse. It is the day the sky fell. It is the first year, the birth of the sun, the origin, the very beginning of the Heliolithic age. This is the 1656 year, Annus Mundi. This is the end of the pre-flood antediluvian world. It is caused by the Phoenix in ancient texts called the Appen. Cataclysm at this time is confirmed by Dr. Barry Wormkessel, who calls it Vulcan. The deluge was predicted and told to by Noah, Manu, Anapishtim, Zasudra. Antediluvian period being over, this is the mandate of heaven changed in ancient China. A new star appeared. Hundreds of cities are shoved under sea. It is worldwide volcanism, continental quakes and mud floods, red rains, cosmic dust fallout, temporary pole shift. The entire episode is mentioned in the book of Jasher, and the sun darkened for a long period of time. 1963 BC. It's a temporary pole shift. There are quakes, bodies of water are moved out of their places, mentioned in the Near Eastern records, mentioned in the Hindu Ramayana, and also mentioned in the ancient Greek texts as occurring in the days of Zeus. 1687 BC is the Ogygian flood. Cataclysm at this time is confirmed by Dr. Barry Wormkessel, who calls it Vulcan. Jacob foreknew of the darkening of the sun. The people of Tiahuanaco in South America predicted the coming of the sun disaster. Heliolithic maritime empire collapses. New world age in India. 25-year darkness and famine is recorded in both the Mediterranean and in the ancient Americas. Minoan linear age begins. Giant object is seen in the sky. The sons of the Sun dynasties all collapse. The Book of Jasher, the Bamboo Books of China, Marcus Varro, Augustine, Julius Africanus, all record this event. The Kraken floods Joppa and darkens the sun in the Perseus story. Easter Island is abandoned and the Avellino eruption buries the cities around Mount Vesuvius. In this year and the following 24 years, the vapor canopy attempts to return, but does not. After 25 years, the darkness is over and the famine period is done. This is the origin of the 7-year biblical famine in the story of Exodus. 1549 BC, 3 suns shone in the sky, unusual storms. The sun dimmed in the sky and the sky turned red. There are recorded tsunamis. Historian Castleton notes that in the Cyclades region there was a cataclysm. 1411 BC, temporal pole shift, and then a restabilization. A new star appeared. Meteoric fallout. Sky turned bloody red, flooding. This doom shape appeared as recorded in the Colburn Bible, and Egypt is absolutely devastated. This event is the origin of the 10 plagues story in Egypt, which is combined with the sky fallout of the Israelite conquest of Canaan, when the Canaanites had rocks from the sky raining down upon them. 1273 BC, Archaix predicted the sun darkening and won the kingship of Archaix. The sky turned bloody red, the sun darkened. Socrates, Archilochus, Seneca, in Thyestes, Euripides, and Electra, it all mentions this event. It is also found in a cuneiform tablet in the Annals of King Merciless II of Hatti. 1135 BC cataclysm, at this time confirmed by Dr. Barry Wormkessel, who calls it Vulcan. Tuatha Danann predicted the sun darkening before the Battle of Moytura. Mediterranean Dark Age begins. Minoan Linear B collapses. Mandate of heaven in China changes from a comet. Then a comet darkened the sun. It was bloody red over Babylon. There are Mediterranean tsunamis, and a dust rain afflicted the world. 859 BC, the phoenix symbol appears on an Assyrian relief, commemorating the fact the Assyrians were expecting to see it that year. This relief is famous, and it shows the Israelite king Jehu bowing in subservience to the Assyrian monarch. The year 721 BC, the Assyrian inscriptions show that a new world age began. These new world ages were like ancient India, and they are connected to phenomena, unusual events that occurred in the sky. The kingdom of Israel falls to Assyria. Almagest of Plutarch mentions this event. So does Ovid, Marcus Varro record. The sun and the moon darken. Clouds are seen in the heavens far beyond the sky. There are flames across the sky and noises like skyquakes. The event is also observed by Chinese astronomers and mentioned in Roman annals. 583 BC. Thales of Miletus, a Phoenician by remote descent, these are Israelites, predicted the darkening of the sun in the month of May, 2 years before it happened, and it indeed occurred. This is the Vandenberg data. A new calendar at Delphi begins. Also, a new calendar in the Japanese imperial period of the Sons of the Sun begins. The sun is eclipsed, and this is recorded on a monument at Yassilikaya. 445 BC, archaeologist De Jong recorded a disaster caused by an object in the sky, widespread fires. Estimated death toll was 830,000 people. In this year, a solar eclipse or a darkening of the sun occurs according to the Chinese, and the stars appeared in the daytime. 307 BC is a phoenix year, just like every other year enumerated in this video. However, we have variant dates for different things that happened about this time. This doesn't mean they didn't happen in this year of 307. Some of them are dated 306 or 305, and it's been so much over 2,200 years that it's just impossible to really narrow it down from some of these ancient traditions. One of them is a broom star, a comet that appeared and was noticed by China to be very unusual. Greece recorded the exact same thing. It is also found on the Parian marble. Now, this is also the timing for when there was great disasters recorded in Europe and preserved in the Dutch Oralind manuscript. 169 BC, we have records again from China of sky phenomena. We have perhaps a meteorite or comet. In Italy, a torch is seen burning in the sky. In 31 BC, again over Europe, principally Greece, a torch is seen in the sky for many days. That these accounts are back to back, 169 BC and 31 BC, is an indication that the Phoenix phenomenon was, in older times described as a sky dragon, is also disguised as a giant wolf that eats the sun or eats the moon. And at this period of time, for some reason, it was being described as a torch in the sky. So earthquakes in Asia Minor, an earthquake in Tralles, in Lydia, in many cities in Ionia, Mysia, and Aetolia all fell from quaking. So 31 BC, the Chinese Han Dynasty records a sky phenomenon. There is also a Macedonian record, continental quake from the Aegean to Judea in the month of May during the Battle of Actium. Now, the Yucatan is absolutely ruined. It is the final date found on all Olmeca steels. A sky dragon is actually seen to fly over Egypt. 246 AD, in the area of Kent, an old Briton annal, a bloody sword is seen in the sky, and there is a rain of blood from the sky. And at Lincolnshire, England, the ocean overtook thousands of acres of land that were forever lost to the sea. In 384 AD, Lycosthenes in his Chronicon records a bloody pillar in the sky. Now, there is an anachronism here because of tampering with the calendar by the Roman Catholic Church to put the Justinian plague data in what they had recorded in the Justinian plagues. As I revealed in my own video about the creation of the Anno Domini calendar, it's the Roman Catholics really messed this area up because they removed 10 years from the calendar, and a lot of references in old text to 394 AD are actually 384 AD. Believe me, the papacy has done us no good in the preservation of historical integrity. So during the time of Theodosius, there was seen an object in the sky. Bright globes were seen at night, and they seemed to merge into a sword. That's very interesting. Instead of a sword passing across the sky, which would be a comet, different independent glowing objects passed through the sky and then merged together into a sword, just the opposite. In September, European earthquakes throughout Europe all the way to November. There was a period of darkness over Asia Minor. Night turned into day, and it was recorded to not be an eclipse. 522 AD. The Dark Age begins in Europe. C.E. Britton, on the reign of Octa of Kent, mentions something appearing in the sky, as well as the Welsh annals, earthquakes in the Aegean. 522 is earthquakes devastated Olympia, Greece. Sky dragons were seen over Britain. A celestial war of monsters. They rained great drops of blood, which were followed by famine. The Kent tradition records that a strange star appeared, attached to a light ray that ended in a flaming dragon. Now, in those records of old Britain, it said that a celestial war of monsters occurred. 522 is also the end of the Mosh culture of Peru, which totally vanished. It is an archaeological enigma. 522 AD was not the creation of the Anno Domini calendar. It is what the Anno Domini calendar covered up, the Phoenix timeline. Like I said earlier in this video, I have a presentation about the papacy in covering up this great event to hide the Phoenix phenomenon. The great darkness that appeared over Europe, Byzantium, over the empire of Justinian and the Justinian plagues and many of the sky phenomena that occurred at that period has purposely been misdated in modern records to cover up the phenomenon. In the year 660, We have a single reference. It's from ancient Scotland. There was an aurora-like phenomenon in the sky, and the sky was said to burn. In the year 798 AD, there are quakes, a dark sun. There is flooding in Mayan cities. Constantinople, there is an obscuration of the sun that lasted for 17 days. This is definitely not an eclipse. In Ireland, the snows were so bad that both men and animals perished. In the year 936 AD, over Belgium, there is an obscuration of the sun, and the sun turned blood red in a clear sky. 138 years earlier, in 798, the Maya culture was decimated. But now in 936, the appearance of the phoenix ends the Mayan culture. In 1212 AD, the ocean rose up against the land in Holland, and 306,000 people drowned. In July, over France, colored rain fell upon the people, and a halo appeared in the sky. A shower of blood at Caen. 3 crosses appeared in the sky over Philae. Also in 1212, the winter at Novgorod, Russia, was so cold that it destroyed the early harvests. Children were sold as slaves for bread. In 1212, quakes visited the Middle East. And the Children's Crusade was a story that was invented by the authorities of the time because they could not explain how hundreds of thousands of children across Europe mysteriously vanished. In 1626 AD, an earthquake in Italy destroyed 30 towns. 17,000 people were killed. In this year, the Chinese record a sun darkening and meteoric rain that fell upon the people. In 1764 AD, astronomer Hoffman, in the month of May, watches a dark object pass over 1/5 of the sun's surface as 500,000 Europeans see it with the naked eye, traveling from north to south over the ecliptic. In the same year, in the Ganges, India, an earthquake killed great numbers of people. In Germany, a tornado caused much deforestation at a place, forgive me for my pronunciation, Mecklenburg. Also in 1764, the Philadelphia bolide meteor larger than the sun exploded in the sky. And in 1764, in the month of October, blood rains fell for several days, also at Renan and Cleves. In 1902, in the month of May, an unknown star appeared. Quakes, volcanic eruptions, red rains, dust veil. Charles Fort, later in the Book of the Damned, who was alive at the time in 1902, he wrote that 1902 was the other dark age. Phoenix again transited, bathing our world in hundreds of millions of tons of red dust all over the world. Volcanoes in Guatemala and Saint Martinique killed about 40,000 people. Again, evidence of a soft reset. Unusual events happened in 1902 where the entire world stage erupted with new companies, new inventions, new texts, new translations of older texts. It was as if everything in the creation had been holding its breath, just waiting for the pass of something to be clear so they could move forward. As shown in this thesis, in my presentations and books, every single date that was just itemized is on a timeline of multiples of 138 years. Some of them are back to back every 138 years. Some of them are 276 years or 414 years, a cursed earth period, or a phoenix cycle of 552 years, or 690 years, or 828 years. Every single one of these are divisible by 138 years. The phoenix phenomenon leads to the conclusion that in the year of 2040, In the month of May, May 15th or 16th, the sun will darken by the phoenix. There will be lithospheric displacement. Oceans will slip their basins. The cities of New York and London and hundreds of other cities that are on the coast will be shoved under sea. There will be worldwide volcanism, continental quakes and mud floods, red rains and cosmic dust fallout. This is, in the eschatology, the sixth seal of the apocalypse. It is the sixth sky dragon of Mother Shipton. It is the black son of the Hopi. It is the Fenris wolf that swallows the sun and moon in the weird of the gods. The Ragnarok, which means the day of darkness. It is the fulfillment of the Phoenix icon, the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. This leads to 138 years more to the final year, the ultimate collapse of the simulacrum itself in the year 2178. These things are better understood by watching the playlist and seeing the videos or reading the books. This is a simple presentation to familiarize people with a very basic concept so that we can move forward, and I can now show you some very profound patterns that the Phoenix phenomenon throughout history shows us. It is my intent to show you the patterning of our world history is the absolute proof that we live inside a construct. Welcome to this presentation. This is Medusa, Star Codes, and the Red Star of Phoenix. Just can't get away from that Phoenix, can I, guys? More and more data just keeps coming. The most revealing story from the old world concerning the Phoenix is the myth of Perseus and the Medusa. You all know it, made popular again by the hit movie Clash of the Titans over 35 years ago. The Kraken was a colossal sea monster that threatened to destroy the city of Argos if the people did not offer a human sacrifice. Now, the girl Andromeda was offered, and Perseus went on a quest to kill the Medusa to use her eyes against the Kraken to save Andromeda. Andromeda was the daughter of King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia of Joppa, which is a Canaanite city. In Cepheus' constellation is located an unusual variable star called Herschel's Garnet Star, one of the reddest luminaries visible to the naked eye. Cassiopeia also has 2 variable stars. The constellation Andromeda has 5 variable stars. Variable stars, unlike any other luminaries, change their brightness and were the most feared objects in the ancient skies. Queen Cassiopeia offended Poseidon, the god of the sea. Andromeda was chained to a rock to await being devoured by the sea monster, represented by the constellation Cetus in the heavens. Now, this monster, or Kraken, has been depicted as a gigantic squid, and this carryover involving tentacles and human sacrifice produced Medusa, a once beautiful goddess turned hideous. Further, these are memories of the ancient Bronze Age ceremony of human sacrifice when a large squid was set on top of the face of a paralyzed victim, a Medusa. The beginning of the myth is very telling. As soon as the story starts, the sun darkens and the Canaanite city of Joppa is flooded. The background timing for this legend is 1687 BC. Perseus was not a Greek, but acknowledged to be a foreigner. Some say from Assyria, a land of the Near East where thousands of representations of Phoenix have been found. They have been discovered on monuments and on prisms and stelae as a winged disc. The Assyrian god Anunna rides this winged disc, which was the symbol for the Phoenix. Now, in the Psalms of the Old Testament, this imagery is also found with God riding on the back of a winged cherub beast. In the Greek story of Perseus, whose name means destroyer, the hero rides astride a winged horse. Other Greek stories associate horses to the sun chariot. Now, Medusa has always been linked to the stars. The eye of Medusa is called Algol, the ghoul, an undead creature, also known as the blinking demon in the Perseus constellation. It marked a region of the night sky feared by Bronze Age humanity. Algol is a variable star called Beta Persei, the demon star in many cultures. In the story of Medusa, she turned men into stone, which was an old metaphor for perish by disaster. Long ago, fossils of animals and even people were found, and they were interpreted for what they were, the petrified remains of those that had died in a cataclysm. In fact, the word disaster is derived from 2 older roots meaning evil star. The word catastrophe means falling stars, and the word hysteria means people going crazy during a disaster, which is also derived from star. Perseus decapitates the Medusa and uses her magical eyes of petrification to kill the Kraken, which was merely a monstrous personification of the unstable sea that flooded cities when Phoenix darkened the sun in 1687 BC. We have shown it in citations from ancient texts that the Phoenix was often referred to as the Destroyer, which is what Perseus means. Perseus, the Destroyer, killed the Kraken from the sky. Now, Perseus is located in the northern stellosphere. Phoenix always appears suddenly out of the blackness of the northern heavens, a winged cataclysm associated to Cygnus, the swan, which has the mysterious Cygnus rift. Curiously, directly above the beginning Aries of the zodiac, in the end Pisces, the flood, was an end, are Andromeda, Perseus, Cassiopeia, Pegasus, and Cygnus, all in the same region of the sky. We have shown in many of our notes and posts and videos that the constellation Pisces was long ago associated to the appearance of Typhon, or the Phoenix, where is located another variable star called Tixpicium. Variable stars are very active during disasters, when stars are evil. I have shown in videos and notes that variable stars are not real luminaries, but very local objects that coordinate attacks against our world, projecting phenomena like Phoenix disasters to induce resets, volcanic activity, quakes, and even affect human populations. My video, Dark Realities, mentions this artificial stellosphere, the role of the variable stars, which seem to operate in concert to create phenomena on Earth. In fact, just prior to every Phoenix destruction, there appears a very strange red star in the sky. The next variable star cataclysm to occur is May 2040. And in the Andromeda constellation, above Pisces, the end is a binary system, 36 Andromedae. One star orbits another at 165-year cycles, with its last periastrion being 1957 AD. This means, as observable from Earth, the maximum separation between these stars will be in 2040 AD. My friends, I hope you're not tired of hearing Phoenix material, because I keep finding more. But I assure you, our world is not what you think. These three floods were all within that period. You have to understand, in the last 500 years, look how far our own civilization has gone. And I often say in my videos that it just takes 200 years for us to go to horse and buggy to Hadron Collider. Imagine how far they could have went in 12 centuries. But they couldn't, because something was retarding their development. So you see, it's widely known that many innovations appeared suddenly in the 35th century BC. Suddenly, in the East, we had all kinds of cereals and domesticated animals that had never before appeared there. And the main thing that appeared, that had never before appeared, was the institution of human writing on perishable materials. Let me explain. In 3439 BC, a technologically advanced civilization, so advanced that they did not need to write anything on paper. They didn't need to write anything on tablets, on wood. They were far more sophisticated than that. We're talking about a civilization that was more sophisticated than we are today. The Sumerians recorded that all of their knowledges, everything that they needed, could be done on a tablet. They carried these tablets on handles, and they called them mes, or maze. I don't know how to pronounce it, Sumerian logogram. This device showed pictures, took commands, knew the destinies. It was for programming. And when the Sumerian gods used these things, outward phenomena happened. Large stones were lifted, all kinds of things. These things controlled the dragons. Now, I'm calling them dragons. You and I know they're machines and tractors and heavy haulers, heavy equipment, all that. Even things that fly in the sky. The reason human writing started ubiquitously, and you must understand, this has been known in anthropology. Writing just didn't appear on Easter Island. It didn't just appear in ancient Urartu. It didn't appear among the Aryans. It didn't appear among the Egyptians. It appeared among them all, and at the exact same time. But everybody had their own version of what they were putting together in writing. Some left to right, some right to left, some boucherphone, which went right, left, right, left, right, left. Pictograms, some recorded their data on quipus. But some of the oldest examples of human writing are very technologically advanced dots and dashes, for which the later Olmec, Zapotec, and Mayan calendars were developed. Ancient Chinese and Near Eastern systems and calendrical systems were developed, from which the abacus derived. What I'm saying here is that our version of history is absolutely false. The civilization that fell in 3439 BC from the Nemesis X object, which appeared in November, totally ended a civilization that was so technologically advanced. All of their writing and all of their data was recorded holographically or electronically, or whatever what their technology was at the time. It was vapor canopy period. We don't know the extent of their advancements, their engineering. The mechanics of their world were fundamentally different than ours. But the reason all these ancient cultures appeared after 3439 BC is because Jonathan Gray is correct. All of these artifacts that he and others have found all around the world, these magnetic discs and just strange objects that show technological precision, is because that world was fractured. And the Jewish Haggadah text only says this about that period, that there was a terrible sun darkening and there was terrible earthquakes, and 1/3 of the world's population died in that hour. And it's called the Flood of Gihon. The Gihon River is the Nile River in Egypt. Suddenly, only after this period, we have the development of writing. Everybody's preserving different things, and there are so many elements about ancient pictographs that give us the ideas that people were trying to communicate in their symbols, ideas and concepts that were far more advanced than the primitive mind could follow. We find examples of this everywhere. And it's been misdocumented. It's been misunderstood. Like Piazzi Smith in 1901, which Stephen Walsworth and I were commenting on this morning in the Archaix group. He had no frames of reference in 1901. The leading Egyptologist of the time, whose measurements of the Great Pyramid and the Giza and other temples in Egypt was to 1,000th of an inch, so precise that they are scientifically accepted today. But in 1901, Charles Piazzi Smith, he didn't understand what he was looking at. He could not process hyperbolic curves in solid stone to precision, such high tolerances to 0.025%, which is flatter and smoother than the marble on bank buildings found at Giza. He could not process how 2.5 million blocks that were all 2.5 to 5 tons apiece, some of them were 70 tons, but how they could have all been put together in 203 absolutely perfect levels, and yet still there was mortar between the stones, 1/50th of an inch thick, with a chemical composition unknown to us today. We don't know what some of those compounds are in that adhesive that was used at the Great Pyramid. We don't know how that adhesive is actually harder than the limestone blocks itself. Hyperbolic curves. We're talking about ultra smooth precision boring. When Sir Flinders Petrie measured some of the boring holes, he was flabbergasted. In 1901, he couldn't understand how a boring hole could be so smooth and absolutely devoid of striations. Either a laser made those holes, or the apparatus that drilled those holes through 17 and 18 feet of layers of blocks was, the revolutions per second were so high that it literally burned through the rock. Something that in 1901 he couldn't understand. Machines built many of the monuments of the ancient world. They constructed them. They were put together. They lifted the rocks. We have traditions of 60 and 70 ton blocks floating through the air. Jonathan Gray has shown very, very good evidence that the deeper we look at ancient cities and civilizations, the more technologically advanced we find the architectural, the buildings. But many of these ancient structures, the oldest ones, seem to have been, they had the ability to transfer electricity and maybe energy in the form of vibrations. They were able to channel it. And it's just very interesting. But my main point is that from two entirely different perspectives, two men who have never met each other, who have spent their lives researching their passions, have arrived at the exact same conclusion. Jonathan Gray is convinced that in the 35th century BC, the world came to a stop. It was very highly technologically advanced, and everything afterward, the development of Sumer, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, the Indus Valley civilizations, the Aryan civilizations, Dravidian, the Egyptian, Babylonian, Akkadian, Sumerian, the Amorite, the Urumbaba Valley, the Yangtze Valley in China, and then South America, the Chaco Valley of America. All these civilizations only developed after that civilization was fragmented. The technology was lost. Writing was now necessary because the devices that their predecessors used were no longer functioning. Well, they didn't have them anymore. They were gone. Over thousands of years, mud floods, liquefaction, volcanic resurfacing, tidal surges, scrapped, just getting buried. We lose things. We lose things all the time. Materials in the ancient world had more value than they do today. It doesn't matter if it no longer had its core function. It would have been used as something else later on. Additionally, we have found some very bizarre things in people's tombs, and some of them are inexplicable. In the writing of the Egyptian historian Manetho, we find a reference to a very, very specific number of the demigods and kings of Egypt that ruled until Egypt collapsed. That number is 1,752 with a zero on it. All the Egyptians did, they always added a zero. So it's actually 17,520. But as I've shown in all my other videos, all these dates line up perfectly if you just take that one zero off. The Greeks added that zero every time. Now, this is too specific a number to ignore. Look at this chart. 3439 BC to 1687 BC, the time between all three of these floods is exactly 1,752 years. Any of you can Google it. The Egyptian historian Manetho specifically said that this was the period that the demigods and kings of Egypt ruled until Egypt collapsed. That's interesting, because in 1687 BC, the whole damn world collapsed. That was the third great flood. The mystery of history is coding. This thesis completely shatters every theory of the Great Pyramid ever told, ever sold, or said. When you fully understand the implications of this video, you will agree. A series of numbers representing years and disasters appears in records from antiquity that defy ordinary explanation. They reappear in recorded historical texts over and over again. Then, in a third and most astonishing place, these same numbers appear all together in a synthesis so profound that their arrangement forms a holographic blueprint in multiple dimensions. All three are found in this item. This chronology is shown in our posts, articles, videos, and published books to isolate May 2040 as the next visitation of the Phoenix phenomenon. Not an intruder world. It's worse. Part 1. Phoenix periods cited. Censorinus in the 3rd century AD wrote that Aristarchus of Samos reckoned a great year as 2,484 years, which is 138 times 18. This 2484 year period was the time between two cataclysms, according to Aristarchus. This Ionian mathematician and astronomer studied at the hallowed halls of the Alexandrian library, and he had access to materials that we no longer possess. 2484 years betrays a knowledge of a definite chronology that existed in his time, further evidenced by the fact that 2 centuries prior to him, Thales of Miletus, another Ionian scholar, accurately predicted the phoenix blackening of the sun in the month of May 583 BC. 2484 years added to 2484 years is 4,968 years. Dr. Barry Wormkessel concludes, after reviewing historic records and modern scientific reports, that Vulcan, which to him is a distant Jovian-sized planet that's a member of our solar system, this distant Jovian-sized dark star companion of our sun is on a highly inclined 4968-year orbit. Vulcan attracts comets from the Kuiper belt, Cooper, I'm not sure, and has formed multiple, at least 5 comet swarms that pass through the inner solar system. These comet fragments hit Earth at quasi-periodic time intervals, 3,313, give or take 200 years is his estimate, which is really interesting because 3,312 is divisible by 138. It's 138 times 24. His Vulcan is none other than the Phoenix. I have personally exchanged correspondence with Dr. Wormkessel and my data that the Phoenix is indeed the Vulcan that he has discovered. Around 1902, the historian Hans Bellamy published a series of books concerning the capture flood, the sudden appearance of our moon in the skies in a world that had never seen the lunar orb before. A cataclysm had occurred, widespread flooding. Bellamy published that an analysis of Maya reliefs and tradition held that this destruction from the sky was connected to an event that was measured at 2,760 years. This is 138 times 20. Also in ancient America, we have the Inca remembering a catastrophe that began their own history. In 1624, historian Montesinos wrote that the Inca recalled a beginning period of 2,070 years, which is 138 times 15. This is too arbitrary of a duration. If not derived from a precise historical chronology, then they would have just said 2,000 years. In 1658, Archbishop James Ussher published his famous World Chronology. It is found in many Bibles. He had access to historical records that have since been lost or hidden in the past 362 years. This chronographer describes an unknown astronomical body appearing in the skies, causing the Ogygian flood in the Old World calendar year of the year 2208 Annus Mundi. 2208 is 138 times 16. This was 1687 BC in our own modern day Gregorian calendar, and it is the subject of many videos in Archaix. The Archbishop's source materials were different. Over 340 years before, Stephen Jones concluded also that the sun darkened during a major worldwide series of quakes in the year 2208 of the Book of Jasher chronology in the Assyrian eponyms. Jones published his findings in the 1990s in his book, The Secrets of Time, and he does not mention once that his materials derived from Archbishop James Ussher. Strangely, Bishop Ussher died in 1656 Common Era, and according to the Genesis 10 Patriarchs chronology, it is the conclusion of over 40 ancient writers that the old world civilizations ended in a great flood in the 1656 year, which is 138 times 12. This is curious, for any ancient Egyptian ceremony concerning a flood concerns a 1656 month period, and 1656 months is exactly 138 years. Over 900 years ago, the Talmudic researcher Rashi, around 1090 CE, wrote that the Great Flood occurred in the 1656 year, and that 1656 years was a definite period of time that occurred between cataclysms. Half of 2484 is 1242. And the French Jewish prophet Nostradamus wrote in a private letter that 1242 years, which is 138 times 9, was the period before the flood from Adam to Noah. Stephen Jones published charts in a book demonstrating that over 60 historical events were all transpired on timelines that were 414 years apart from each other. Again, this is interesting, for 414 is 138 times 3. Stephen Jones knew nothing about the Phoenix research because the Archaix research and Phoenix research by myself was not conducted until years later. The Egyptian 1656 moons that designate a 138-year period is paralleled in the old Jewish tradition of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and the appearance of the angel of death every 138 years. This is a Jewish tradition. The angel of death. Phoenix, anciently depicted with burning wings like a seraphim angel in Scripture. Every duration listed is a Phoenix number divisible by 138. 2484, 4968, 3312, 2760, 2208, 1656, 1242, 414, 138. To put this list together after the destruction of so many texts, libraries, and traditions is remarkable in itself. Now, part 2. Phoenix dates in history. The following dates are all dated in other records and sources when Phoenix appeared and caused worldwide or localized continental quakes, blackening of the sun, moon turning red, meteoric fallout, volcanism, lithospheric displacements, mud floods, and a harrowing vibration so terrific people, communities, and structures simply sank into the earth and remained trapped underground when the vibrating stopped, returning the ground to a hard solid. Buried alive. These years where this occurred was 4307 BC, 3895 BC, which begins the Genesis narrative of the pre-flood world, 2653 BC, 2239 BC, the Great Flood so popularized in Antiquity, 1963 BC, 1687 BC, the collapse of the Heliolithic empires, 1549 BC, 1411 BC, 1273 BC, 1135 BC, 721 BC, 583 BC, 307 BC, 246 Common Era, 384 Common Era, 522 Common Era. Then there's a 1,104-year period where there's no records, but many legends of destroyed civilizations throughout the ancient Americas. Phoenix returns in 1626. Again, it is seen by astronomer Hoffman and over 1 million Europeans in 1764. And then in 1902, it visited our world. And history books have been scrubbed, but Archaix has put the picture back together. Now, part 3, the Phoenix Holofield Mysterium. The book Lost Scriptures of Giza is a work unlike any other on the origin and purpose of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Over 1,000 facts gleaned from hundreds of ancient and old source materials. This book concludes that the Great Pyramid is the original structure and all other pyramids were attempts to copy it. It was designed to survive a cataclysm to preserve knowledge that only at an end-time generation would be able to perceive. It was built during a 1656-year pre-cataclysm period. It protects a secret important to saving humanity. The elect will rediscover what this important knowledge is. You are about to learn the principal message of this most enigmatic monument. No pharaoh, no known historical civilization, no ordinary architecture could have encoded this material in this gigantic structure. Only the most advanced scientific measurements ever conducted in and outside of the Great Pyramid could even produce these revelations. Flinders Petrie used instruments accurate to 1,000th of an inch, and his measurements are today accepted by Egyptologists. No other building in the world is so precise, a self-referencing holographic model of our space-time coding. The Great Pyramid is enormous, a 41-story high structure. It is 203 levels of blocks, some courses higher than others. The beginning of the 144th level is 4140 inches above the pyramid foundation. 144 is the great number of the golden mean. the Fibonacci series. It is 12 times 12. It is the cycle within a cycle. And that level of blocks marks the 4,140th inch above the pyramid foundation. 4140 is 138 times 30. This exterior height is replicated in the internal descending passage mean length. The east terminus length is 4134 inches. The west terminus is 4146 inches. The central mean distance is 4140 inches of passage length from pyramid entrance to subterranean passage floor joint. The vertical distance from bottom of floor slab, called the great step central axis of the monument, or floor of the king's chamber, straight down to the ceiling of the subterranean chamber, is 2,726 inches, and the horizontal length of the subterranean passage itself is 1,414 inches. Together, they add up to 4,140 inches, 138 times 30. This is self-referencing. The Great Step is a peculiar 126-inch long block of limestone. The rest of the floor of the King's Chamber is granite. The King's Chamber from floor to ceiling is 230 inches. This 126 times 230 is 28,980, or 4,140 times 7. Again, divisible by 138. The height of the subterranean chamber at 11 feet 6 inches high is 138 inches. At this 138-inch height roof in the underground chamber, we find a ceiling that is 552 inches in width, or 138 times 4. While this 552-inch distance is below the pyramid, above the pyramid, 552 is geometrically inferred. The present height of the Great Pyramid is 5,448 inches. This is 203 courses of blocks. This is 552 inches under 6,000 inches, meaning the flat-topped 203rd level is 552 inches under 6,000 inches. As above, so below. When a cornerstone is put on top of the Great Pyramid, it will be 552 inches high, 138 times 4. The central subterranean pit access to the end of the subterranean passage is a horizontal distance of 908 inches, and the subterranean passage floor surface is a vertical distance of 1162 inches below the pyramid's baseline. The subterranean horizontal and vertical distance is 2070 inches, 908 plus 1162. 2070 is 138 times 15. The 552-inch width of the subterranean chamber is 1,070 inches below the pyramid's baseline. The length of the entire subterranean passage level is 1,414 inches. This vertical subterranean distance and horizontal underground distance add up to 2,484. 1070 plus 1,414. 2,484 is 138 times 18. Now, adding the 552 ceiling width to 2,484, it's 3,036 inches. Again, divisible by 138. But more importantly, it is a common measurement throughout the pyramid. This 3,036 inches is the exact length of the descending passage from the passage axis conjunct to the descending passage floor joint. 3,036 inches is 138 times 24, or 253 feet. That is a very long distance to go through scores of courses of block with granite casing on the inside of the tunnels to be laser perfect, smooth, and precise. The entrance of the Grand Gallery is 1,200 inches above the baseline foundation of the Great Pyramid. The ceiling of the Grand Gallery is 1,836 inches distance, and added to the gallery floor height of 1,200 inches is 3,036. Again, we find that number. The pyramid is self-referencing. Half of 3,036 is 1,518, 138 times 12. The passage axis conjunct is 3,036 inches down the subterranean passage from the conjunct to the floor joint. And measuring the opposite direction from the passage axis conjunct to the pyramid perimeter is 1,518 inches. The actual height of the Great Pyramid is 5,448 present inches, but The 51.51 degree sloping angles of the monument reveal that the top cornerstone would be 3,066 inches high for a total monument height of 5,814 inches. Not my discovery, 5,814 geometrical height known since the 1920s. This 1514 finished height is a vertical distance of 4968 inches above the Queen's Chamber floor, which is 846 inches above the pyramid's baseline. 4968 is 138 times 36, and 2484, which is 2484 plus 2484. The bottom of the foundation slab of the Great Pyramid that serves as the floor of the King's Chamber is 1656 inches above the pyramid's baseline. 1656 is 138 times 12. The Great Pyramid has 4 sockets at its 4 corners. The length and width of the northwest and northeast sockets are 138 inches. The Phoenix numbers appear here in multiple dimensions. The passage axis conjunct is 176 inches above the pyramid baseline, and 176 times pi, 3.14, is 552. Again, that's 138 times 4. The King's Chamber is 230 inches high. The Queen's Chamber is 144 inches high. The subterranean chamber is 138 inches high. 230 plus 144 plus 138 is 512. 512 times phi, the golden proportion of 1.618, is 828, or 138 times 6. Phi is golden proportion. It is 1.618, and it appears everywhere in nature. It is the primary substrate coating for the holosphere. The simulacrum operates off a coating run by 1.618, 3.1416, and 5.08. The 3 chamber heights are all commensurate with 138, which is the holosphere simulacrum's resonance. 138 is profound. It is the principal message of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The King's Chamber, on the floor, the distance is 534 inches to the great step central axis of the pyramid. This is the central axis of the entire monument. This King's Chamber is 412 inches long, 204 inches wide, and 230 inches high. 534 plus 412 plus 204 plus 230 is 1,380, which is 138 times 10. 534-inch horizontal length of the great step slab of the King's Chamber and the 846th vertical length of the Queen's Chamber floor to the pyramid baseline adds up to 1380, 138 times 10. In 1926, the engineer David Davidson published that it was his calculation that the Great Pyramid's internal rectilinear timeline isolated a certain year important to pyramid chronology at the passage axis conjunct. Not knowing anything of the Phoenix timeline, the Phoenix research of resets and mud floods, cataclysm, Davidson published that this year was 2484 Anno Pyramid. Again, 2484 is divisible by 138. Central axis great step face is 34 inches high to the King's Chamber floor surface, and the great step floor joint with the Grand Gallery is 1656 inches above the baseline of the monument. This is 1,690 inches down to the baseline, which is 1,070 inches above the subterranean ceiling, for a total of 2,760 inches, 138 times 20. The perimeter of the Great Pyramid sloping distance upward to the entrance is 808 inches, this entrance being 666 inches above the pyramid baseline. The entrance to the passage axis conjunct is 1,110 inches, which itself is 176 inches above the baseline of the monument. 808 plus 1,110 plus 666 plus 176 is 2,760. Again, 138 times 20. The great step central axis of the Great Pyramid to the perimeter of the monument is 4,554 inches, which is 138 times 33. David Davidson measured the exterior of the Great Pyramid and determined that its four sides are at 51.51 degrees from the base perimeter to apex, but it's been conclusively shown in measurements and photographs that the pyramid actually has 8 sides, each face having 2 planes only slightly angled. Thus, 51.51 times 8 is 414, 138 times 3. A holographic blueprint of our space-time structure. Our holofield is coded to revolve at 365.25 days a year, a figure found encoded in the Great Pyramid many times over and mentioned in several books. What these facts and measurements mean is that the physical dimensions of the Great Pyramid are connected to the 138-year Phoenix phenomena visitations that the message of its builders concerned themselves with, building a gigantic structure that would preserve these patterns for future posterity. What this also means is that every tradition, article, book, YouTube video, theory, or idea about the function of the Great Pyramid and its purpose and the purpose of the Great Pyramid in Egypt is false, if not incorporating into their model this 138-year unit spatial and calendrical data. The unusual Mayan king Pakal Votan died in the year 692. And the Maya built a temple of the inscriptions over his sarcophagus, which had been laid on an older structure. Pakal Votan was commemorated as the greatest king of the Maya. His tomb would remain hidden under the pyramid for exactly 1,260 years when discovered by accident in 1952 beneath 13 corbelled vaults that embody the concept of the 13 heavens of the Mayan cosmology, which mirrored the 13 Bactans of the Mayan long count calendar. Pakal Votan was a mystery. In his tomb was found a statue of a Caucasian in long robes with a beard, a goatee, facial hair being non-existent among the Maya. Further, Pakal Votan was said to be a foreigner who had arrived among the Maya by ship. The sarcophagus was huge, once holding the remains of a man who stood at least 8 to 9 feet tall. The lid of the sarcophagus itself is 5 tons. The multi-ton sarcophagus lid was an elaborate engraving of Pakal Votan that is used by the ancient astronaut theorists as evidence of ancient space travel, who claim that this depicts a rocket ship. But this is not a rocket, but an elaborate device Pakal Votan is using to study the cross of the sky, an ancient concept, and that at the top of the picture is what he is searching for, a Mesoamerican stylized phoenix. This year, 692, is in fact exactly the 5,000th year of the Phoenix chronology, so thoroughly documented in Chronicon, all 3 of my other published books that talk about Phoenix and the Phoenix chronology, and about 17 or 18 of my videos. That year in that chronology has never deviated a single year throughout the 16 years I've been studying Phoenix. It is a shame that Daniken, Sitchin, Childress, and so many others have conducted so much research, yet not one of them, not a single episode of Ancient Aliens, has covered the history of the 138-year visitations of Phoenix. They have read all the same ancient and historical texts that I have read. Having conducted an extensive study of the ancient American beliefs, the author Brunage concluded that the god Quetzalcoatl was originally a sky god, a sky dragon, the central focus of the Aztec religion. Quetzalcoatl was known as Kulkulkan to the Maya, the feathered serpent, a hybrid creature of the sky, sometimes depicted with 2 heads. In fact, Brunage's landmark book was titled The Phoenix of the Western World, Quetzalcoatl and the Sky Religion. Published in 1981 by University of Oklahoma Press, the franchise Ancient Aliens and a whole host of other authors have little excuse. That was 40 years ago, but still, outside the Archaix books and these videos, not a single YouTube video, published book, or a post across the World Wide Web that I have ever discovered or has been brought to my attention has ever corrected this misinterpretation.